I got my Canadian firearms license, a PAL, and you can too. PAL, Possession Acquisition License. The PAL is the only license currently available in Canada. The RPAL used to be available to new applicants. It's not anymore. The laws have gotten far more restrictive in the past few years. A lot of changes over the past decade. And gun legislation is a big mess. It's not the scope of this video. I'm not going to get into all the different restrictions on the type of firearms, the size of firearms, ammo, different accessories, and limitations on the magazines. Like, you can't have a silencer or a bump stock in Canada. But I'm not going to get into all that. It's too much. There are weapons that can be used in Canada, firearms, but they're used as tools and only tools. So you can use them for competitions, you can use them for hunting, like go to a shooting range and fire them, but they're not, it's not like the United States. You don't just open carry and show your gun off. They're not used to to make a person feel big and powerful. The guns in Canada are used for hunting mostly. As an example, in a safety course that I took, I was told that shotguns can only have a maximum of 3 shells loaded at a time. They can hold more, but they're not allowed in Canada to hold more. There was one type of rifle, I can't remember what it was, but it was limited to only 5 shots in the magazine. Not allowed to have more than that, even though it could hold way more than that. The magazine had to have a modification added to it. It was something inside the magazine that blocked bullets from being put inside. So, and legally had to keep it that way. So I'm not going to get into the gun legislation. It's numerous. It's very restrictive, and just going to learn how to use firearms as they are, as a tool, and that's good for me anyway. That's what I want. The other license, the RPAL, which is a restricted possession acquisition license. Those are no longer given out to new applicants in Canada, but for people who still have them, that lets them use other guns that I can't, including a whole range of pistols. I don't get to use, with a regular PAL, I don't get to use pistols. I can use shotguns, I can use rifles. If you want to use a firearm in Canada, here's what it requires. 1, safety training. 2, paperwork with references and a photo. 3, a federal background check by the RCMP. 4, a minimum wait time for new applicants of 28 days, but I hear that the wait time can be months long. 5, a provincial safety course may also be required for hunting. So you need, from the RCMP, federal license to use a firearm. So that'd be the PAL or RPAL. But to hunt in your province, you would also need to have safety instruction and licensing from that particular province or territory. So 5 is a safety course for the province for hunting, and 6 is the licensing from the province to go hunting. 7, you need permission. You need permission to hunt on private property, if it's farmer's land, or you need permission to fire at a shooting range. It's their range, their rules. 8, there are exceptions for special firearms, antiques, collectibles, indigenous trap lines, there are different rules, and museums. Number 9 is, if you've got an RPAL, those firearms may require an authorization to transport, an ATT. You need to fill out special forms. It's, again, through the RCMP, and that's for transporting those firearms. So if it's a restricted firearm, you may need special paperwork, special permission to be able to transport it somewhere, even if that is to a range. And the range will often ask you for that paperwork. They want proof that you are legally allowed to bring the firearm there and use it. How did this journey begin? This autumn, I went to a gun show at the Saskatoon Wildlife Federation. They had the gun show. They also have a shooting range nearby. after the show, I signed up for a firearms safety course. Safety training is the first step in Canada to legally owning a firearm with a possession acquisition license, PAL. The course for me was $150. I waited for the course date, then I traveled back to the Wildlife Federation. The safety course was a classroom setting with a test at the end, so filming wasn't appropriate. I can't just put out a camera when there's testing there. And the information they were providing, that's something that I paid for, other people pay for. It's a private session. 2 former RCMP and 1 hunter taught the class of 6 students. The hunter was in his 80s and preferred to use a muzzle loading rifle to hunt. So that was different. I thought those were antiques, a blunderbuss, a relic of the past, but no, they're very modern weapons. That was his expertise. The instructors took turns speaking about different topics they were most familiar with. Safety was a big focus. I got the message loud and clear that firearms in Canada are tools, not toys, and not for intimidating people and inflating egos. Part of the training was hands-on. I was the only student who had never handled a rifle or shotgun before. The other 5 people, they were much younger. They were in their early 20s, and they had, you can get a junior firearms license, and that's what they had. I have shot a few pistols. That was about 15 years ago at West Edmonton Mall. They have a shooting range in the mall where anybody can go and rent a gun, and there's an instructor who will watch and make sure you're using it safely, and you don't need a license there. So I did shoot a few pistols at a shooting range in West Edmonton Mall about 15 years ago. It was a long time ago, and that's my only experience. It was a Desert Eagle, like in Counter-Strike, and a Magnum like Dirty Harry, and I think there was one other, and I don't remember what it was. It was a smaller smaller pistol. It was more typical. So in this class, I needed to hold these rifles, and it was a little bit intimidating for me. It was all right. It was I didn't know what the weight was. Just what's the weight of a gun? What does it feel like? I have to be careful of where I'm pointing it. I became really self-conscious of everything I was doing and my movements, and I think it was pretty awkward, but it's all right. I learned. I'm more comfortable. I'm more confident now, so it's worth going to, even if it seems like a scary idea, even if you're a little bit nervous. Try out some firearms training and see how you feel afterwards. Try it out. If you're like me and have no prior firearms experience, you've never handled a gun, that's okay. It didn't really matter. The instructors were happy to make sure that I understood the course material, but it was all pretty straightforward anyway. There were a lot of rules that if you've never held a gun before, never used one, maybe you just wouldn't have thought of those situations, but like a first aid course, it all makes sense once it's explained. Some examples. Don't jump or climb over logs or fences with firearms. Supposed to unload it and pass it to somebody else over the fence, or put it under the fence, climb over the fence, and then pick up the weapon and reload it. If you've never held a gun before, you've never had to think about crossing a fence, so it's not that big a deal, but there's a few rules like that. Don't shoot up a hill because your bullet might arc over the top of the hill and hit something on the other side you didn't see. Again, it's not not the most difficult thing to understand, but it's worth taking the course. It's filled with tons of tips like that. A few mind-blowing gun facts, things I never knew about. Maybe you didn't either. Bullets are not large brass cylinders.
Whoa! New Joe!
Hey, Ma, guess where I am?
That's the casing. The casing actually gets left in the chamber of the firearm, and only the small bullet at the tip is the projectile. 2. Firearms in Canada don't need to be securely locked. something as flimsy as a zip tie counts as a lock because someone has to intentionally remove it to use the firearm. 3. Looking down a gun barrel is a good idea, actually. If you've heard never look down the barrel of a gun, that is completely wrong. Safely using a firearm requires the barrel to be free of obstructions. So snow, dirt, stuck shell casings, muzzle-loaded gunpowder that's left behind a mess. They can get stuck, and you need to safely unload the firearm, unloaded, then you check down the barrel to make sure it's clear. 4. Pump action shotgun. Bolt action rifle. I thought that was an adjective, and a noun. I thought it was two descriptive words describing the gun, but it's not. An action is a noun. An action is a part of the gun, the parts that move. The gun has 3 parts. There's the stock, there's the barrel, and then there's the parts in between that move. And that's called the action. And it makes way more sense now to hear something like a lever action rifle. So the safety course is over, and now it's time for paperwork. 2 references are needed and a photo. The photo has strict measurement and style requirements. So you can take your own photo, it is allowed. But if you're like me and don't have access to a dark room for processing photos, try a local pharmacy that's used to taking the correct photos for passports and licenses. They know what they're doing. It's easy, and it doesn't cost very much. It was less than $10. After a few days of collecting reference signatures and a photo, I was ready to send the forms. And it's recommended that you use registered mail so that you can track your package. For myself, it cost $9.75, so it's a bit of an expense, but not too much for securing your personal information. The mail was sent October 10th and arrived on the east side of the country 1 week later in Miramichi, New Brunswick, on October 16th. Steps 3 and 4 of getting your license. It's a mandatory wait time, more waiting time as a criminal record check and psychological background check is done. Waiting might be very important because nearly 75% of gun deaths in Canada are self-inflicted. That's according to the safety instructors at my course and the Canada Safety Council. Buying a firearm impulsively, if you're having a bad day, could be a very, very dangerous situation. So the wait times save lives. Our southern neighbors in the US famously solve interpersonal problems with guns. In the US, people turn on each other. In Canada, Canadians turn the firearms on themselves. I don't know why that is. It's a cultural difference. It exists. After 6 weeks of waiting, my license finally arrived in the mail. I've heard my wait time wasn't too bad, that some people have waited 4-5 months to get their license. And some of those people were just trying to renew. The PAL expires 5 years from your birthday, not the time when you submitted the paperwork. Step 5, hunting safety. Safety courses are specific for each different province and territory in Canada and may be required to obtain a hunting license in that province. I found an online course recommended by and accepted by my province, and I did it over a 2-day weekend. It cost $65 plus tax. The Hunter Safety Course completion certificate when I was finished. That arrived in the mail after about 3 weeks. Took about 3 weeks to get to me. Step 6, a hunting license. So once you've got your hunting safety training, then you can look at licensing in that province. And it needs to be a license for a specific time of the year, a specific place in the province, and for a specific animal. And there'll be limitations on how many animals you can shoot as well. This is a step I'll get deeper into next year. For this year, I'm filming this right now, recording at the end of November, and December 2nd is the cutoff for the hunting season this year. So I missed my opportunity that's okay. There's more time to practice, to prepare. I get to go to a range. I get to figure out what I'm going to do when I actually hunt. So the gear that I'm going to wear, and how do I get in contact with people and ask their permission. And you need to get the permission of a landowner. Speaking of which, that is step 7, permission to shoot. So if you're at a shooting range, not a problem. They've got strict rules about the types of ammunition and firearms you can use at that range, and it's all spelled out. Their policies are very black and white, and it's their private property. So if you don't obey their rules, you just get kicked out of their property. You can't shoot there anymore. The fees that they charge are going to vary at the different ranges, but you can expect for annual fees up to about $400. You might find some deals that are less than that, but you're going to be paying for an annual membership if you want to be using a shooting range regularly. Hunting does require the landowner's permission, and there are legal restrictions on how far away from buildings and other people firearms can be discharged. So some advice. I'm not a lawyer, and I'm not dispensing legal advice, but if you're making any kind of a contract or agreement, you need to get that in writing. And if you're dealing with firearms and somebody else's property, you should absolutely be getting that permission in writing. You don't want to just verbally phone somebody or talk to them. You met someone last weekend and they just said, yeah, it would be fine. That's not good enough. A friendly conversation in person or on the phone, it's verbal, they seem like a great person. Well, maybe they forget. Maybe they got the date or the time mixed up, and they meant the next weekend and not this weekend, because they're going to be out in the woods with their family. They don't want anybody shooting there. People might make mistakes. They might be dishonest and lie. So you want to get it in writing. Text message, email, signed paper agreement. If you have nothing else, get your phone out and video record the two of you speaking. At least there's some recording, but don't just go by a verbal agreement. Steps 8 and 9 are for special agreements with the Canadian government to use and transport firearms that I will not be dealing with in this video. Museums, Indigenous people with trap lines, and experienced RPAL holders have to deal with those laws. Thank you for watching, and if you have any comments, any questions, please leave a comment on the video. Like and subscribe if you want to see more of these videos, and hopefully you find this information helpful. Thank you.